What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta, the best handicapper in the nation at Vishaal_Gupta 95 on Twitter. V, how are you doing? How are you living? It's been a great season so far. We're ready to break down another week.
Yeah, doing great. Super excited. I think we have a good slate this weekend. Should be some fun games to watch. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a good one. And the slate might not be jam-packed with a ton of great games. There's a few games that kind of got robbed of some injuries that we'll kind of get into maybe a little bit later. But yeah, there are a lot of opportunities to make money this week, that's for sure though. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to break into some money, break down some games. We have a couple of games on the slate that are actually from some people in the Discord. So Wise, if you're watching, we got some of your picks in here tonight. So make sure you tap in here, check it out, or also head into our Discord. You got to go to our website, importantnonsense.com, become a member. That's how you get in there. You can ask us all the questions you want, all your betting questions. You can ask all the fantasy guys all the questions about your lineup this week and, get all the answers you need to be locked in. So we're ready to break it down. But first, we're going to head into talking about the Thursday night game, the Thursday night game. So the Broncos headed into Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. And, it didn't quite go as expected, but then did go as expected in a lot of ways, which is super strange. So the game ended 8-19. The Chiefs end up covering a 10.5-point spread. This game goes under 47. It was just kind of a strange game altogether. But there's stuff that we kind of gathered, at least big takeaways we can have from this game. One of them for me specifically is that this Chiefs team is going to build around this defense this year. We've talked about it a lot this year, specifically, V, you've brought up how impressed we've been with this Kansas City defense, how well they've played. To put that into perspective, right now, they're only allowing 14.7 opposing points per game. That's second behind San Francisco. They're also sixth in EPA per play allowed. That's really good for a team that a lot of the times was just kind of putting their defense on the back burner, trying to win shootouts, winning games with their offense. And this year, it's looking a little bit lopsided in the sense that this offense hasn't been booming quite so much. We were kind of joking about it before we went live here. Isaiah Pacheco, somebody that we were high, somebody that specifically I was high on coming in and was actually betting on going into this game and even put into our Discord, take the over and take the touchdown. You get a nice little mint plus 150 there for that. And Isaiah Pacheco ends up, not getting his number called a whole lot. Kadarius Toney's the only one with a touchdown. There's just not a lot of boom on this offense right now outside of like Travis Kelce and Isaiah Pacheco when they really get him going. So that's going to be their identity moving forward, is playing solid defense and, putting up in the 20-point range in order to beat teams by a pretty sizable margin. The other thing that we learned, obviously, Denver's offense, like they've had their moments, but there's still not a lot of cohesiveness on this unit. Not a lot of separation from these wide receivers. Now, Russ only had 95 yards, which is an atrocious look, but he also had, he had one really bad interception where he threw it right to a linebacker, dropping through the middle. He had one that he got picked off from a bounce. It's just been a tough break for them. Not a lot going right. Now, to be fair, they've looked okay on offense this year, but there's still a long ways to go for Sean Payton in this system to really dial in. And, we were joking about it before we went live, but who knows? Russ might not be under center for this team this time next year because of how this is going so far. So what did you make of this one when you were watching it, V?
Yeah, first one is definitely what you said off the top, which is this Kansas City defense is definitely for me the surprise unit of this season so far. They've been fantastic. They have not given up more than 20 points to an opposing offense yet this season. That's through 6 games. They have 3 separate games where they have allowed 10 or fewer points to opposing offenses. I mean, they've just been completely on fire. It's crazy to watch how good they are on that side of the ball when you consider how much talent they have on offense with Mahomes and Kelsey. So that's definitely going to be something to look at, as for the rest of the season, because I think when a lot of people see Kansas City in a game, the first thing they think of is I'm going to take the over, because you just think Kansas City is going to put up so many points. Mahomes and Kelsey are so unstoppable, and their defense is usually around average, so they'll probably give up some points here and there. That's just not the case this year. Their defense is fantastic. If you're not going to put up, if opposing teams can't put up more than 20, it's going to be hard to hit some of these overs, because these totals are still going to be set higher than normal, given that you have Mahomes and Kelsey on the one side, and you know that they can score whenever they want. So they're going to be inflated a lot of the time, that total. So I think there's going to be a lot of unders on Kansas City games going forward this year until those totals get adjusted. And then for Denver, it is what it is kind of at this point. They're off. You have to pick and choose your spots with them. That they've had 2, I would say, solid games on offense. Those came against Washington and Chicago, 2 of the worst secondaries in the league. So you really have to check out the matchup and see, does this defense they're going up again have a good secondary, average secondary, below average secondary? And if you say they have below average, then yeah, maybe you can fire up some of those players, or take the over, or pick Denver to cover or win, or whatever it is. But if that's not the case, you can't take them in any of these spots right now, because they're not reliable at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're Kansas City and you have a guy like Trent McDuffie on the outside who's playing as they would have hoped when they drafted him as high as they did, and he's playing out of his mind right now. He's playing great football. He's a lockdown cover guy. He goes to bat with some of the best receivers out there, and he really, locked up this Denver unit. And they're showing that, for 3 quarters, this game was
Not close.
nothing,
Yeah.
not close at all, and even ended not close. And it was not as close as even the score would indicate, which is still, a 2-touch or a 2-score game. So, just like you said, I totally echo that sentiment. You got to pick your spots with Denver this year. There probably will be some, but they'll be few and far between. And with Kansas City, you have to kind of understand that these markets are going to be inflated, just like you said. And that's a good opportunity for everybody to attack moving forward. Absolutely. So the first game we head into for the week that has not been played yet is another London game, V. We've got another one on the slate. This one, the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Tennessee Titans. And I'm on this one mainly because of some cliches, that you could fall into with traveling and whatnot. Last week, it kind of came back to bite me because I discounted the Jags' ability as a London favorite, as a London home-based team, as Trevor Lawrence's stomping ground out there in London. They're now 3-1 against the spread in London. So that's going to be something we watch moving forward. And one of those games against, obviously the Bills, which is impressive. So now we have both Baltimore and Tennessee. When I look at Tennessee, this is a team that just is really struggling in a lot of facets of the game. Offensively, their secondary is very bad. They really just struggle at multiple levels. It's hard to really put a dot on exactly where they falter. But one place they falter time in and time out this season has been on the road. And I guess technically they're the home team here, but they're far from home.
Yeah.
So this is just going to be that type of game for them where you really shouldn't expect a lot from them. On the road this season, Tennessee, 11.3 points per game. That's the 3rd worst in the NFL. The last time either of these teams went over at all was back in week 2. And I know that it seems like the season just started. Like, that was a month ago. So they haven't gone over for an entire month. That was also each team's only over this season. When you look at it, Baltimore played they did not play a great game, but when you compare them to kind of how Tennessee musters along, Tennessee is a great coach team. They stay in games. They just aren't really pushing out the talent right now to compete in a lot of these games, while Baltimore kind of kicks themselves in the foot or shoots themselves in the foot, stumbles over their own feet. Last week, they had a lot of players coming back from injury. They dropped the game to Pittsburgh late. I think that this week they kind of rebound here. Some of those players knock a little bit more of the rust off, and the talent disparity is just a little bit too big here. Now, I'm not comfortable taking Baltimore at -4.5, also traveling to London. But what I am going to lean into is this under here at 42. If you couldn't have told already from how I was spitting at these unders, it just only makes so much sense because when these teams travel, they just aren't putting it out as well. The body clock is off. These games are early. And even when they are in the States, they're not really that great at on the road, either of these teams. Well, Baltimore to a degree, but Baltimore also is their own worst enemy. It's so hard to tell which team is going to come out each week. So, with that being said, I could see an over potentially, but it would have to be a very sizable effort from Baltimore. And I don't see Tennessee really competing much for this one. V, do you see anything with either of these teams as an indication of where we can lean towards them even moving forward? It's been so confusing with this Ravens team because specifically for me, I thought they were going to be a very talented offense this year with this firepower they have. They've had injuries, they've kind of been underwhelming all in all. So what do you make of these two rosters right now?
Yeah, well, starting with Baltimore, I think it's a continuation from last year where they're just kind of getting in their own way too often. It's not really anything that the opposing teams are doing. It's more so that they just continue making mistakes. I mean, there were multiple times last year I remember where we were on Baltimore and they had sizable leads, but then they just kind of blew it, whether it's their defense just couldn't step up or their receivers and playmakers let Lamar down. Or you remember that game against Miami where they were up huge in the fourth quarter and then they just got blown out in the fourth quarter. It's just deep bomb after deep bomb by Tua. And then there's a game late in the season when they went down to Jacksonville and they also had a big lead, but then their playmakers just again were dropping balls left and right. And then they allowed Trevor Lawrence to have his true coming out party in the NFL where he looked like, yeah, this is the guy, this is the number one overall pick. But that was, a lot because Baltimore just couldn't do anything. And then happened again last week. There's no reason they shouldn't have won that game by double digits. They dominated that game for 3+ quarters, but then drop pass after drop pass after drop pass. And then, Pittsburgh's defense finally got some momentum. They get a block punt, and then TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith start teeing off, and it just the whole game changes. So it's hard to figure out with Baltimore. I mean, they can look like the best team in the league one week, and then they can look like whatever that was last week. With Tennessee, I don't know. It's very, very strange with them. It's kind of somewhat similar, but I mean, you go 2 weeks ago and they have a very, very dominant performance at home against the Cincinnati team where everything was clicking. Tannehill looked good. Derrick Henry was finding so much space on the ground. Their defense looked unstoppable. And then you go into last weekend, Derrick Henry can't pick up 1 yard on 4th and 1 in order to score in the red zone, which is just that can't happen. And you have someone like Derrick Henry, so what is the issue? It's very hard to pinpoint with them where the issue lies, which makes it very difficult to bet on them. It kind of feels like you just got to bet on them when they're a dog and then just fade them when they're favored because there's just no way to count on them to have any sort of dominating performance. So honestly, for me, right now, they're probably going to be teams I'm just staying away from because I just can't figure out what they're doing at all on either side of the ball. I just don't know what version of them is going to show up in any given week. So it's just stay away from me at
Right.
this point.
Right. Yeah. For me, the big differentiator between them is like Baltimore looks like they have a high ceiling. They just might hit it less often than Tennessee's kind of shorter ceiling that
Mm-hmm.
they kind of tend to hit a little bit more often. But you're right. You're absolutely right. These teams have similar profiles in the sense that they just do not get out of their own way.
Yeah.
And luckily they're both really good coached teams. So they stay in these games. And like you just said, they have these stretches where it's 3 great quarters and then all of a sudden all of that unravels in one 15-minute span at the end of the game.
Right.
So that's where I lean to. Add the travel in, and I think you're in a good recipe for under 42 there.
Yep.
That's a very reasonable number also at that point. So the next game we have on the list is actually one that I'm targeting. So, truth be told, I don't have a ton of big lines, like a ton of lines that I'm targeting this week in terms of volume. There's just a few games that I'm really targeting like heavily. And this is actually one of them. So, we're looking at San Francisco heading into Cleveland. So, as everybody's probably heard by now, Deshaun is out with the shoulder injury for the second straight week. And if anybody, I'm sure that a lot of people might not have even seen how bad this team was last week because they did not really get into the red zone with Dorian Thompson Robinson. They were bad. And now they went out and elevated PJ Walker from the practice squad. Luckily, he was on the practice squad. So it's not like he has to learn the entire offense this week in order to start like some people have. But this is an uphill battle for him. And we're as much fans of PJ Walker. PJ made us a believer last year with how good he was against the spread. So I actually went back and looked into it. PJ Walker as a starter against the spread, 5-2. Now that's impressive.
Yeah.
But truth be told, none of those came against a team like San Francisco. Now, with that being said, San Fran is just absolutely the best team right now in the NFC. They're coming off a shellacking of the Dallas Cowboys, who are an impressive team in their own right. They're a good team, and they made them look like a very, very mediocre team. That's just how good San Francisco is on both sides of the ball. They have an elite defense. They have offensive playmakers that are good at every position. And they're so good that a guy like Brock Purdy, now, no discount to Brock Purdy. He's played fine. But they're playing so well that any mistake he makes does not matter. It doesn't. That's how well this offense plays around him. So when you look into that and we see, okay, for me, obviously, and for everybody, the biggest matchup of this game has to be this Cleveland D against the San Francisco O. Cleveland, obviously, a league lead in EPA per play allowed by a wide margin. Well, San Francisco's not that far behind. So you're looking at two of the best defenses, but the big difference is Cleveland has not been able to do anything offensively. So when we look at what Cleveland's done offensively, they have just 3 points last week. I like Walker. That's not going to be enough. They don't have enough at playmaker right now to really compete with any of these high-end defenses. And as much as I'm impressed with what Myles Garrett and company can do, they're running up against Trent Williams in one of the best offensive lines this week. I think it's an easy thing to kind of lean on. Oh, well, this game can be close if the Cleveland defense can keep it close. That's a huge ask for a team that hasn't been able to do much. Last week, they didn't really keep the game that close, and there was only 3 points scored for them. So at the end of the day, when we can get this game at 9.5 and not 10 or 10.5, you have to attack that because that, I don't know, I'll open it up to you. Do you see any instances where San Francisco is going to stay within 10 points of PJ Walker in this Browns team right now?
Yeah, that's going to be a tough ask for them to do. I think not only is PJ Walker starting his first game of the season on a new team, they have injuries up front. We already know Jan Conklin is out for the year, but we also found out that Joel Bitonio is going to miss this game. You're missing 2 of your 5 starting offensive linemen for a group that has been one of the best over the last few years. Trying to get some backups in there, going up against Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, and all these beasts up front for San Francisco. It's just not going to go well. You might want to try to run the ball, but looking at the advanced metrics, Jerome Ford has not been great looking at those metrics. Definitely not anywhere close to what Nick Chubb gives you as a running back for that offense. So I don't see where they're going to be able to go with the ball or how they're going to move the ball and put points up. Your only hope would be is if that Cleveland defense can force some turnovers from the San Francisco offense. But, Brock Purdy has been fantastic at taking care of the ball. He has not thrown an interception this season. I think he's the only quarterback where we can say that. So you might, even if people aren't like sold on him yet, you have to give him so much credit for doing his job, which is to take care of the football right now. And that is what he's doing. He's doing a tremendous job of that. So if Cleveland's not going to be able to take the ball away, I don't see how they're going to be able to really stay in this game. They do have, they have great pieces. We know Myles Garrett is fantastic up front. I think there's some great metrics for Denzel Ward in the secondary. He's had a great season so far. So they have dudes all over the field on defense, but trying to slow down this San Francisco offense for 60 minutes, I just don't see it happening. So you can definitely take the spread in this one. You can hit the under on this one, whatever you want to do. I think it all makes sense for me, but betting on Cleveland in any shape or form is going to be tough for me on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at how San Francisco's offense has been second in EPA per play behind just Miami, and we know how good Miami is offensively, and they've been right up there. And so when we look at what Cleveland has to hope for in terms of production, books are or odds makers are putting their game total at 12.5. So I'm leaning towards the under on that one. Obviously, I think that to see them hit into the 14 range, 13, 14 would be shocking for me, considering how poor they were last week with Dorian Thompson Robinson. And when you think about what that means in comparison, so the Cleveland defense, very good. But when you look at what San Francisco's offense has been able to do, putting up over 30 points in pretty much every game, even taking that down a little bit, you're still looking by well over 10 points that they're going to take this game. I think it's an easy wrap. Honestly, I'm going to be riding San Francisco for probably a long time. I don't
Yeah.
really see many teams out there that are going to be able to compete with what they can put on the field every single game. So, short of any catastrophic injuries to key playmakers, I'm going to be riding them for quite a while, and I think everybody else should too. So, the next game we have on the agenda here, though, I'm actually excited to talk about because of how Houston has played this season, how CJ Stroud has played this season. So we have New Orleans heading into Houston to take on the Texans. The Saints are actually 1.5 point road favorites. The game total here is 42.5, which is actually something that we're both attacking on the under here. I mean, the Saints showed out last week.
Yep.
Or was that just kind of a process of them playing the Patriots? The Texans didn't quite overcome the Falcons, but they still look like a better team than they kind of put up on the scoreboard. What are you making of this matchup, V?
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting game last week, Houston versus Atlanta. I was on a Houston +2. That ended up being a push. I think Houston was played well. I mean, they only gave up 2 offensive scores. They won the turnover margin 2-0, but their offense just couldn't get anything going. I mean, CJ Stroud didn't turn the ball over or anything, but there was so many 3 and outs. So I think it was just a good game plan by the Atlanta defense, but in this game, I'm definitely liking the under in this game. I think both defenses have been very good. The Saints are allowing just 15.2 points per game. That's the 5th fewest in the league. The Houston defense has allowed a total of 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. D'Amico Ryans has them playing fantastically, even though they don't have a ton of blue chip guys on that defense. For the Saints offense, they broke 20 points for the first time last week. It was Carr's first game of the season where he had more than 1 touchdown pass. So, I mean, you can say maybe this is a breakout performance, but I think most of us are going to lean more towards the Patriots are just kind of a mess right now. And this is probably not a great indicator of who the Saints are going to be going forward. I just think they're still not a very good offensive team, and I don't see them being able to do as well as they were able to do last week. And even last week, like, they had a pick 6. They had some other turnovers. Their defense just played so well that the Saints offense had so many possessions and so many short fields that, they kind of should have done what they did, but you can't bank on that going into every week, especially not this week when you're going up against a Houston team where you also have CJ Stroud, who has also not thrown an interception this season. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, but I just don't see a whole lot of points either way. This should be a very, very low scoring game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And frankly, I would be more on the side of Houston, you know, if this wasn't so close to one. We talk about this a lot when you get kind of below that 3 margin. It's
Hmm.
kind of a pick 'em in a lot of
Yeah.
regards. So here though, I obviously think Houston is on the up and up. I think we all are. We love watching them play and how well D'Amico Ryans has them playing. And we saw what the Saints can look like when they're hitting on all cylinders, but they just haven't hit on all cylinders at all this year. And like you said, they were awarded with a lot of short field, a lot of golden opportunities off of a Patriots offense that we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I think when you look at what Houston wants to do with kind of their timing route offense and how CJ Stroud plays football effectively, I think it's not always conducive to huge point numbers as much as it is to kind of high percentage passes that are going to kind of almost in a way, I hate this term, but like the extension of the run game term, it's so corny because it's not an extension of the run game, it's the pass game. But it's going to effectively accomplish a similar goal where it's going to keep the clock going, it's going to kind of reduce these possessions, which has actually helped D'Amico Ryans in that defense keep them to lower scoring margins. They haven't let teams run away on them,
Right.
even though they've struggled with advanced run defense metrics in a lot of regards. I know for the month leading up to this point, they were one of the worst graded run defenses in the league. They had a huge number of negatively graded run defense plays, but that hasn't seemed to stop them. So when you look at this game, I like that, but I think we're all leaning towards the under there. It's a much safer, higher value play than taking the Texans and the points, even though I think we both like the Texans also.
Yep.
The next game we have on the schedule, um, it's a mismatch to say the least. So you have the Carolina Panthers heading into Miami to take on the Dolphins. The Dolphins 2 touchdown favorites. Total on this game 47.5, and you know it's not because they think this one's going to be a shootout.
Yep.
The What do you make of this one? It's a tough draw sometimes when you get these really big spreads, but even sometimes 14 doesn't even seem like enough. So what do you see with this matchup?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like enough in this game. You have just teams in completely opposite directions right now. You have a Miami team that is averaging 36 points per game. You have a Carolina team that is averaging 18 points per game. On one side, you have Tua, who looks like the MVP of the league so far. And then you have Bryce Young, who has just not been very good. He's in the bottom five in many advanced metrics, such as EPA and QBR. The Carolina team is very banged up. They're going to be missing Miles Sanders. They have a couple offensive linemen out in Austin Corbett and Chandler Zavala. A couple safeties are going to be down with Xavier Woods and Von Bell. And then their two star defensive linemen, Derek Brown and Brian Burns, are going to be missing this game as well. I don't know what they can possibly do to stay in this one. I mean, it's not going to be close. I don't imagine this being close at all. You know, Miami will be missing Devin Achan for a few weeks, but Raheem Mostert is more than good enough to carry that load. You know, you still have Tyreek Hill, you still have Jalen Waddle. There's really no universe right now where this Miami team or with this Carolina team with so many guys out, and we didn't even mention J.C. Horn, who's still on IR. Their supposedly stars cornerback. He's not there. I don't know what this team can do to slow down this Miami offense. So just give me the points. It doesn't even really matter what the point total is. It's gonna be a blowout.
Yeah, by the end of this one, you're going to sit there and be like 13 and a half. This was a 28-point game because just like you said, it was a matchup if all things are going well, or a mismatch if all things are going well, and they are not in terms of injuries for the Panthers either. So, sizable mismatch, not a lot to go to. I don't even know if we have to keep beating this one down, but we might as well just continue to prop up how great the Dolphins have been offensively. They've been so impressive offensively, and that's even if you throw out the 70-point game, they've still been impressive offensively in pretty much every single regard. It's so funny because we talked about Devon Achan having his injury, and a lot of people don't even realize that what's his name? Chris, I think it's Chris Jones. Who's the third backup there that had
So,
another
Chris Brooks maybe out of BYU.
Chris Brooks, that's it. He also I feel so disrespectful because I'm about to shout him out even more. After that week, all three of these Dolphins backs were the top graded backs in the league. Now, Brooks didn't qualify for the list for volume reasons because he hasn't had enough snaps, but all three of these guys, every time they've touched the field, are just outrageously good. And we've already talked about how great Raheem Mostert's been, or Mostert. Shout out Jack Kavanaugh. I will never not. It's imprinted into my head to say Mostert. Raheem Mostert, how good he's been, even in having his role limited since Achane's kind of burst onto the scene. This team doesn't care about their numbers because they know that everybody's going to get them at the end of the day. They just want to produce. And now, they have Chase Claypool. Like, what a like, I don't really know if that moves the needle by any means, but like, I guess the rich get richer might be a term. I mean, I don't really know if that quite qualifies because Chase Claypool hasn't been like great by really any traditional means, but I mean, he's a big body talented receiver and allows them kind of a prototype or like a build of receiver that they just didn't have on the offense before, I guess maybe. That's a way to look at
I
it,
don't
but
expect him to get very many snaps unless there's some
no.
injuries going on. So he's just kind
No,
of, I
probably
don't know if
not.
he's going to factor into very many games this season.
No. No, probably not. And watch now he's probably going to, burst out for a pair of touchdowns just because Miami wants to because they're that good. That's just
Yeah.
what they can do.
And he'll catch some
So,
balls to Mike White, right?
yeah, exactly, right? Sorry. So, all right, we won't beat a dead horse here. Best of luck to the Panthers in this one. The next game we have on the list is actually going to be probably one of the better matchups of the week. I'm excited to see it. We have the Colts taking on the Jags, and obviously Anthony Richardson is slated to miss this one. I just don't understand where his self-preservation is, but that hasn't quite affected the line a ton. Even with Gardner Minshew slated to start here, the Colts are a 4.5 point underdog on the road against the Jags. And we're actually both liking the Colts. I know that you got it at 4, I believe. And I'm sure that we're even more comfortable taking it at 4.5. I love a good hook too.
Yep.
And you're actually also on one of the sides of this game total here, which I'll let you break into here in a minute. But just the one thing that I wanted to kind of touch on when we've looked at this kind of improved Colts team, where I know they might look kind of middling at a 3-2, but they've been playing pretty good football, at least on the defensive side of the ball. And you know what? At some points, they do just what you need them to do on offense. And frankly, a lot of that's been Gardner Minshew.
Yep.
So Minshew is 3-0 actually against the spread when this team has had to call upon him to either start or finish a game. And that's an impressive feat for a guy who has just kind of been a spot starter for the last handful of years. And even now, coming in to play an offense that isn't necessarily built for him, who's built for Anthony Richardson, and he's playing at a really high level. Or I shouldn't say a really high level, but a higher level than a lot of people would expect from Gardner Minshew. But V, what are you making of this matchup here? I know that we both really like what Trevor Lawrence has been able to do, and especially what they were able to do last week. But I think the traveling this week is going to kind of hurt them. It's tough because we talked about it. The NFL didn't really care about scheduling out these bye weeks after their London trips. And the fact that the Jags spent 2 weeks overseas and now travel back and play a game on Sunday morning, that's kind of a tough draw. What do you make of this one, though, this week?
Yeah, definitely going to echo a lot of what you said, starting with Gardner Minshew. He's played in 3 games so far this year. 1 was as a starter. The other 2, he came in after Richardson got hurt. He's played some really, really good football. He has 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and he's completed 70% of his passes. He's probably the top backup in the league. He just gets the job done. If you go back and watch last week's game, that last drive where they're trying to milk the clock, he just completed third down after third down after third down passes over and over again, sucking the soul out of that Tennessee defense. And it was just fantastic to watch. He just looked so comfortable and just had such mastery over that offense. It was great to watch. The Indy running game has been surprisingly good in the absence of Jonathan Taylor. Zach Moss has been really, really good. He looked fantastic last week, and now they're going to slowly insert Jonathan Taylor back into the lineup as he gets acclimated and gets healthier. They are going up against a solid Jacksonville run defense that has allowed less than 82 rushing yards per game. Jacksonville overall looked pretty solid in their 2 wins in London, but like you said, they now have to travel back and play in the States after having no bye week. Their offense has been like a little hit or miss. They've had some good moments, they've had some bad moments, but I think there's just been too much inconsistency there for me. They have 2 turnovers in 3 separate games this year. They're going up against an Indy defense that has at least 1 takeaway in every single game this year and has allowed 20 or fewer points in 3 out of their 5 games. I think this is going to be a low scoring game where it's all going to be about the turnover battle. Who can take care of the ball better? And so far through this season, that has been Gardner Minshew and the Colts. As good as Trevor Lawrence is and can be, that offense has had problems holding onto the ball. There's been a lot of sacks and red zone fumbles that have really killed drives for them and, prevented them from scoring points. So I think overall, I think this is going to come down to the turnover battle. And weirdly, I have more faith in Minshew than I do Lawrence right now.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily been on Trevor because Trevor's been playing as well as he has been. He last time I checked, he's somewhere around 9 or 10 big time throws,
Mm-hmm.
only a handful of turnover worthy plays, or only a couple of turnover worthy plays. But his guys have kind of let him down this year.
Yeah.
There's got quite a few drops, like you said, just fumbles in the red zone, just kind of tough moments that take points directly off the board for this Jags offense. They've kind of gotten in their own way. As talented as they've been an extremely talented group, at least from Trevor Lawrence's kind of perspective there. So I'm right there with you. So with the total on this one, I know that you were also leaning towards the game total on this. Where are you going with that one?
Yeah, I'm taking the under on the 45.5. I think the Colts, as well as Minshew has played, it hasn't necessarily led to a lot of points. I think they've settled for a lot of field goals. I think the thing is that they have just held onto the ball very well and had long, slow drives that eat up a lot of clock. So if you're going to do the same thing in this one, it's just not going to be a lot of points. I think this Colts defense has played very, very well. They shut down Lamar a couple of weeks ago. They had a very good performance last week, only allowing 16 points to the Titans. They'll go up against the Jacksonville team that, like we said, they have some issues with some consistency. They don't always play as well as they should. And then Jacksonville's defense had looked really good in London in both games. I think their defensive line finally started clicking, especially Josh Allen. He had a couple sacks against the Falcons, and then he had some big-time plays against the Bills last week. So I think their defense is finally starting to show up a little bit as well. So I'm definitely seeing a very low scoring game this one. I wouldn't be surprised if neither team is able to crack 20 points in this game.
It's just so funny too. The Indianapolis is the only place in the world where the Zach Moss believers can flourish and the Jonathan Taylor fantasy managers are in shambles. It's the only place in the world. It makes no sense.
For sure.
All right. So the next game we have on the list, we have the Minnesota Vikings 3-point road favorites heading into Chicago to take on the Bears. And you're on the side of the game total here, which is at 43.5. You also have some props you're liking for this game. Obviously, the Vikings come into this one without Justin Jefferson, who's headed onto the IR. We hate to see it because he's obviously one of the most electric and exciting players to watch in the league. It's going to be, an opportunity for Jordan Addison, who's going to be taking on this Bears defense who has struggled a little bit, but has, kind of righted some wrongs in the last couple weeks, definitely offensively. So, V, what do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. I'm surprised the total is as low as it is, and I'm surprised that it's continued to drop. I think it opened early in the week at closer to 47 and a half, and then news started trickling in about Justin Jefferson missing this game and potentially even longer. It dropped to around 44.5 and is now 43.5. I think that's still just way too low. Both defenses are really bad. Both defenses rank in the bottom 10 in points allowed per game. Chicago was allowing 31.4 points per game. Minnesota is allowing 24.4 points per game. Both defenses rank in the bottom 6 in takeaways. They do not generate turnovers, they do not generate sacks. Neither defense really does anything particularly well when it comes to the passing game. I think they're both okay at run defense, but neither team is very good at running the ball anyway. So I just think this is going to be a high volume passing attack on both sides. And I don't see either secondary being able to slow the other one down, even with Justin Jefferson gone. So I definitely like the over 43.5. I also like Justin Fields to go over 197.5 passing yards. He's gone over this number in 4 out of 5 games this year. And in all 4 games, he has at least 210 passing yards, including having more than 280 passing yards in each of his last 2 games. He's going up against a Minnesota defense that has allowed more than 265 passing yards in 2 out of their last 3 games. Again, there's just nobody in that secondary who's going to be able to really slow them down all that much. Their only real chance is going to be just by getting pressure on them, and they are a very blitz-heavy team, but they have not done a good job of actually translating those blitzes into sacks or stops or fumbles or anything like that. They blitz guys, but then they get beat on the blitz, and then the opposing offenses just pick up chunk yards after chunk yards. So I just don't see either defense being able to do much. I think it's going to be a big offensive game for both quarterbacks. So like the over in a lot of places in this game.
Well, and you hope that for in general terms, just as a fan of football and as a better, and if anybody's going to be wanting to take in a value play on Chicago from here moving forward, we have to see it doesn't need to be an exact repeat performance of last week, but we need to see the Justin Fields DJ Moore connection flourish again.
Yep.
That is going to go a long way for this offense to be able to put trust from bettors behind what they're getting. Because right now, we're looking at them at +3 at home against a Minnesota team that is missing their best player.
Yep.
With that being said, we're more comfortable heading in other directions to attack this game. One more really good performance, and you build that trust that you need to attack lines like this. But for anybody who's definitely going to ask about, hey, what's with Chicago and +3? What do you guys think about that? That's where we stand in terms of right now looking at a game total or a line like this one in with Chicago.
Yep, for sure.
I completely agree with you right there. So the next game we have on the list actually heads into the afternoon slate. And I'm not going to lie, this is a horrendous game.
That's terrible.
This is not going to be an enjoyable game. Unfortunately, it's on in the later slate. So chances are Red Zone is going to have some lull moments that flip over to this game. But really, what can we say? We have the New England Patriots heading in to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders. The game total on this one, 42. The Raiders, 2.5-point favorites. I'm just on the under 42 here. We'll cut straight to the point. There's not a lot of sugarcoating to do about this right now.
Nope.
What's happening in New England is the talk of NFL circles right now. What are they going to do? Is Bill getting in his own way? Is Bill actually a bad coach? Was it all Tom? Is Mac Jones a wash? There's so many questions surrounding this Patriots team right now, and it just makes sense. They're in shambles. Offensively, Mac Jones has been benched twice in the last 2 weeks for Bailey Zappi, which says a lot because they're not really getting a lot more out of Bailey Zappi right now.
Nope.
Frankly, Brett Coleman did a great video on this, but if you go in and look for one thing that's wrong with this Pats team, you're just going to run into way too many issues because it's everything. At playmaker, they don't have much pop. Mac Jones himself making slow and indecisive reads and decisions. And then when you look at the offensive line, they are just getting absolutely whooped in their communication. Pass pro looks really bad for them. They don't lose a ton straight up, but as you start to kind of mix in some stuff, because they can't stay on schedule offensively and they get into these third and long situations, teams are able to tee off on them and draw up their stunt game. And when they get to really mess with the offensive line for New England, everything just kind of crumbles. They've really shown an inability to pass off and play and provide quality pass protection. But even when they do, it's not like Mac has done a ton with it, which is a huge issue for them right now. In the last 2 weeks, they've been outscored 72-3. There's no way of getting around that. It's not just one piece of this team. It's kind of a foundational failure. And I was kind of thinking about it when you watch this offense, they are so far removed in so many aspects from any unit that Tom Brady ever played on for this team. And I think a lot of us still see that like team. We see the helmet and we think, oh, really good coached. They're going to play solid football. And those things may be true. But when you look at this offense, it's just uninspired. It's not a lot of stuff going right for them. And I don't know that you can trust them to do much. But when we look at Las Vegas, they aren't exactly overly impressive either. Even last week, they've only scored 18 points at the top end this season.
It's so bad.
It's so bad. And like, I hate to say that they're, foundationally incorrect too, because they have a lot of foundational pieces that are playing really well. We've called out how well Max Crosby's played. But offensively, they're not getting much going either. Now they have some excuses in terms of injuries, but 42 for these teams right now, I'm shocked that this game's not at 38, frankly. And I'm going to be hammering this under, and I'll probably even look into closer as kickoff goes and kind of double into each team total too, because this is just bad. This is not a good look for either of these teams, and this is not going to be a fun matchup to watch. I think you're going to be seeing like 30 points total between these two and this one. V, what are you thinking about this one? What's up with the Pats, V?
I have no idea. I mean, I think I came into the season not necessarily expecting a whole lot for them. I think they had a better roster than most people give them credit for, but compared to other teams in their division and other teams in their conference, it just was not going to be good enough to compete. You're going to be in a situation where Mac Jones had to be close to perfect for them to, win enough games to be a true playoff contender. And, I thought he looked good for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. Even though the results weren't quite there, I thought he played much better than he probably should have given his talent. But the last 2 weeks have just been a flat out disaster. I mean, they gave up 38 points 2 weeks ago, and they gave up 34 points last week. Both games still went under the total. I think that tells you all you need to know about where this New England team is. I definitely really like your pick on the under. I also just really dislike this Las Vegas team. They very fortunate to win that game last week. They didn't do anything well whatsoever, except they played decent defense, but it was more Green Bay just not playing well at all. If there weren't some other lines I like better, this would be like a hold your nose and take New England because they're getting just way too many points against a terrible, terrible Las Vegas team. But yeah, both teams stink. Both teams are gonna be bad. Both teams are gonna be picking the top 10. Just yeah, under is totally fine with me on this one.
And man, I don't want to harp too much on Mac Jones because, like you said, I think he did play well early on. He just looked like an entirely lost player out there right now. I
Yeah.
know in Brett's breakdown of them, and shout out to Brett Coleman, friend of the show. No, I'm just kidding. If Brett ever wants to come on to the show, we're happy to have him. But Brett broke down a great clip where everybody in real time when we were watching it was going, "What was this guy thinking?" And Brett, breaking down the video is the exact same way. You have no real pressure in the pocket. Mac Jones tries to escape outright, realizes nothing's open on the right side, plants both feet, looks back to the other end, and just throws the worst interception across the field that I've ever seen in the last decade of football, frankly.
Yeah.
So It's that bad right now, and I don't want to harp on them too much, but yeah, under is really the only play you can go with right now on that one.
For sure.
The next game we have on the list is actually a really, really good one. So we have Detroit as road favorites heading into Tampa to take on the Bucks. The game total for this one, 42.5. V, I know you have some picks in this game. Where are you going with this one?
I am going for my upset pick of the week, and it is once again the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have been one of the surprise teams of the year. Baker Mayfield has played very, very well after everybody has written him off after his stint in Cleveland. He is averaging 220 passing yards per game. He has 7 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and has been sacked just 4 times. Tampa Bay's defense is also playing great. They've allowed more than 17 points just once this season when they gave up 25 to Philadelphia. They have 2+ takeaways in all 4 of all 4 of their games this season, and they have allowed more than 70 yards rushing just once. This is the second game for first round pick Elijah Cansey. He played just 11 snaps in his first game, so after they have the bye week, you're expecting him to be at 100% for this game. Him plus Vita Vea up front is going to cause issues, I think, for this Detroit offensive line, especially with their starting left guard, Jonah Jackson, expected to miss this game. Detroit is also going to be without Jahmyr Gibbs for the second straight game, so they're going to have to rely on David Montgomery a lot. But again, they're going up against a very stout Tampa Bay front seven who is not giving up a lot of rushing yards. So if Montgomery is not going to be able to get going in this one, Detroit becomes one dimensional. And I think at that point, that is when they become a beatable team and not this unstoppable juggernaut that we've seen for the last few weeks. Detroit's also going to be missing some guys in their secondary. Brian Branch is going to miss his second game. Emmanuel Mosley, unfortunately, tore his ACL last week. He's going to be out for the season. They are getting Amon-Ra St. Brown back, so that should be good for them. I think both passing offenses are going to be able to find some success in this game, which is why overall I think this game is going to go over the total of 42.5, which feels like a very low number. I think they're going to combine to score in the mid to high 40s. But overall, I think Tampa Bay is the healthier team right now, and I think Tampa Bay does a fantastic job of taking care of the ball, and they do a great job of taking the ball away. So I think not only can they cover, I would not be shocked at all if they win this game outright. I think Tampa Bay is that good. They're coming off a bye week. They have plenty of rest. They're very healthy. I think there's going to be a come back to earth moment for Detroit, who's riding high right now after beating up on some bad teams the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I'm see, I was super hesitant with this one because I off gut went, ooh, Detroit. But
Same. I think a
then
lot of people did, right?
but
Only
then
3-point favorites.
we've talked about how impressive Tampa has been this year.
Mm-hmm.
And they have been really solid unit all the way around. And a lot of that starts with this defense, but enough kudos cannot be given to Baker Mayfield, who has just played fantastically in his new home. He's really embraced Tampa's offense, and they don't put him in positions asking him to do more than he can.
Right.
And I think a lot of people remember the Baker Mayfield that was playing his ass off for the Browns on a busted shoulder, wasn't playing well by any means, but the dude has heart. And now that he's healthier and now that he's feeling it and now that this team is putting him into position, he is succeeding. And that's going a long way for them. To be given 3 at home is the issue with this one. I don't think that, at least in my mind, I don't look at Tampa Bay as a better team than Detroit. I just don't look
Right.
at Detroit as a, say, 6-point favorite against Tampa at home, because I think that this game can be a lot closer, especially with Tampa hosting. And like you said, if we just look at some of these matchups that Detroit is coming out of, Atlanta has been anemic offensively. We've talked about Green Bay's injuries ad nauseum and just kind of their lack of playmaker right now. Carolina, there you go. That's all we have to say. And that's their last 3.
Right.
So as impressive as they have been and as they scored 42 with all the injuries that they did have, and yeah, you just got to take care of business in front of the teams that are in front of you. Tennessee is going to be one of the tougher, or Tampa Bay is going to be one of the tougher matchups that they run into in a while. And I really can't wait to see it. So, Wise, if you're watching, that is the breakdown for two of those games that you were talking about with. So, just for a little context, our guy Wise in the Discord was wondering how we were thinking about Niners Dolphins. Actually, we've almost gotten all of these. We haven't touched on the Eagles game, but we're not actually going to touch on it. So I'm going to ask you this question now. Wise is looking at Niners and Dolphins -6.5. I don't exactly know how he got the -6.5. Probably on a teaser, I'd imagine.
That's where the Niners opened up the week. They've obviously jumped up, but yeah, the Dolphins one,
Oh,
I'm not sure where that one came 6.5 to.
we'll have to, Wise, if you're listening to this, if you see this, hit us up in the Discord. We'll break it down even more. I want to know how you got that line, because if you can still get it, I'm going to go get it. Niners and Dolphins -6.5. I think we obviously both like those because
Yep.
we're on the side of San Francisco. At least I am on the side of San Francisco at 9.5 on the road, and we were both liking the Dolphins at -14. So why wouldn't we like -6.5? But the other games that Wise was talking about here, we have Lions, Raiders, Eagles at money line, and we just talked about this. As much as like the tough thing is like Vegas being a money line, I don't hate it. There might be better picks out there. I don't hate
Yeah,
it.
yeah, for sure.
It's
That's
just
that's
that
where I was gonna go. Better picks out there.
it's just that I think it's more like a bet against whatever New England's been putting out on the field versus like a glowing recommendation of putting your money behind the Las Vegas Raiders. On the other hand, we're talking about the Lions. Now, that's a game I could see being a little bit closer. Now, you just talked about how Tampa is actually your upset of the week, which I can definitely get on board because I think that we see how this team can go and how they can play well, especially if they're clicking on defense. But I definitely don't think that even at -158, like we're seeing right here, I think that that's still a fair value. If you want to go with the money line, I don't necessarily hate it, but again, I think there would be other opportunities that might provide more value. The last one, which I actually don't have up here, but he has the Eagles money line on the road against the Jets. Just off the top of your head, how do you feel about that one? I mean, obviously, I would like it.
Yeah.
I think when you're at a 6.5 point road favorite like the Eagles are, it's tough with the Eagles for me. I think the Eagles are at like a half step down from where they were last year, at least in terms of like how well they play above expectation, but they've been really good on the road. And they've covered every game this year as a road favorite. I don't see why they wouldn't do it again. For me, it's a little bit more hesitant as like 6 because frankly, the Jets have played better defense than a lot of people have given them credit for. Even though we give them a lot of credit for defense, they've still been playing outrageously on defense. And the offense isn't good, but they're not losing them games right now. At least they're not like completely dire, detrimental like they have been in the month leading up to right now. So I could see it. I wonder what I think they're at like 300. I would
I think they
actually,
dipped a little bit lower than that. I think I might be closer to 275 on the money
okay.
line.
If they're like below 300, I'd say you could go ahead. Otherwise, that might be a better opportunity for a teaser because when we look at some of these games, so actually let's just bring this up here real quick. Um, just so we can talk about it. Where are the game totals? Okay, here we go. Yeah, why can't I click on it? Oh well. So if we're talking about it, here we go. There's some more odds thing. If we're talking when we look at like teasers, the way that I like to attack teasers is on weeks like this where there's a lot of sizable favorites. So if we see games like San Francisco at 2 scores, we see Miami at 2 scores, you see a touchdown in Los Angeles, and you see around 6.5. see 14 here. When you see these games that start to reach above and you have a handful of them and you're like, hey, obviously these teams are really good, but maybe you're uneasy about these high numbers. What you can do is tease these together. Take something like Buffalo, take Miami, take San Francisco, and tease them 6 points. Then you're looking at a 3.5 point game for San Francisco. You're looking at, a 7.5 point game here for Buffalo and a 7 point game for Miami. And those are all very reasonable lines to take. And now you're not going to be hitting it like a parlay. It's going to be a much more reasonable, probably around like 150 or something, probably even a little bit lower. Maybe it depends. I don't have the teaser right in front of me, but that's still a sizable value on things that are, I would say, far more likely to happen than not on each of those three instances. So I know that parlays are everybody's bread and butter. All of the sports books love to push them. But we, for years, have been telling you, like, there's other outlets. Don't necessarily fall for that. As fun as it is to put in your really low bet and look at that dollar amount that's really, really high and see that return on investment, those just don't hit. So take a little bit of a different approach. Take some games like this, and trust me, you're going to get way, way more bang for your buck. So that's how I think about it. So Wise, if you're watching, I'll also hit you up in the Discord and we can talk about it more, but definitely hit me up and we can build out some pretty nice little cards for you if you're interested. But so that does Tampa Bay for us. The next game we have on the list, V, is another one that you're targeting here. Arizona heading into LA, taking on the Rams. The Rams are a 7-point favorite here. You're liking Arizona on the road with the touchdown, and I could see it. As much as they lost by 2 scores last week, they didn't look horrendous. Now, they're outmatched to a degree, but they stay in games. They're not going away. They like to compete. And the Rams are a good opportunity for them as a divisional matchup. What are you seeing with this one here?
Yeah, definitely feels like 7 points is way too much for these teams, especially given how the Rams have looked the last couple of weeks. They haven't been world beaters by any stretch. Me and you were both on the Cardinals last week at +3. Unfortunately, it didn't go our way, but like you said, I think Arizona looked a lot better than people were anticipating. They were actually leading the Bengals late in the first half, but then there was an unfortunate pick six near Arizona's own goal line that really changed the game around, and the Cardinals couldn't rally it back. But now they're going up against a Rams defense that has allowed 23 plus points in 3 of their last 4 games and have allowed 240 plus passing yards in 2 of their last 3 games. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Arizona to throw the ball and for Josh Dobbs to have a good game. And I think the Cardinals will still be able to score points even with the injuries to James Conner and having to rely on some backups there. On the other side, this Rams offense looked really good in the first half last week against Philadelphia with the return of Cooper Kupp, but then they ended up getting shut out in the second half. Philly's defensive line just really took over, and they couldn't do much about it. An interesting stat for the Rams, though, they have scored 6 or fewer points in the second half in 3 separate games this year. So they are a fast starting team, but they are a very, very slow second half team. So this could be an interesting spot where maybe you want to take the Rams to cover in the first half, but you can jump on the Cardinals in the second half and try to find some middling opportunities there. The Rams defense overall has not been great. They have just 5 sacks on the season, which is the 3rd fewest in the league. And they're going up against Josh Dobbs, who has only been sacked 9 times this year. If the Rams are not going to be able to get pressure on Josh Dobbs, again, I think that offense will be able to perform quite well. And I also am thinking about taking the over in this game at over 48.5. Haven't decided yet, but like we mentioned, Rams defense is not great. Cardinals defense has also not been great lately. They've given up 31 or more points in 3 of their last 4 games. So this definitely feels like a shootout, but this game should be quite close, and I really would not be surprised if Arizona won this game outright. I think there is not that big of a gap between these two teams as the spread would indicate.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what it was last week for sure is that the Bengals just kind of came up on the Cards. They
Burrow
looked
looked
as
like a different guy, right? I mean, just kind of out of nowhere, he looked like the same guy we saw his first couple
right.
years in the league after doing nothing the few weeks before. It just kind of feels like he came out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about it. Hey, the calf looks like is an issue. The calf looked like no issue. He looked like a spry young man out there. He
Yeah.
was sprinting all over the field, and that was the difference in this Bengals team looking completely reformed. It was literally just one player, albeit the very most important player on the field. And I guess that can show how important Joe is to that offense in Cincinnati. Now, like we just said, it might have been a 34-20 game, but the Cards did not look as bad as the score would indicate. And I'm right there with you. I think that 7 is just too many. The Rams probably end up taking this one at the end, but the Cards just don't go away. They don't go away. 7 is too many at that point.
Yep, for
And
sure.
especially at 7, you get that push value as well. So I'm right there with you. The last game on the slate, Sunday. So this
Can we
one's
like
gonna be in prime
flex
time.
this game out? Is it too late?
This is in prime time, by the way. So we have the New York Football Giants heading into Buffalo to take on the Bills. The Bills are 15-point favorites. It's going to keep going higher. Just get on it before it's 28. There's just not much to be said here. I think we are both more than comfortable taking more than 2 scores. I know that you got it at 14. I got it at 14 and a half. And I'm comfortable even taking it past the hook because what are the Giants going to do right now? When you look at what's happening, so I get that Buffalo is traveling back home after a loss to the Jags, but I don't think that the Giants possess anything that at all worries the Buffalo Bills right now. The entire offense for this Giants team is out. Dan Jones out, Saquon Barkley out, John Michael Schmitz out, Andrew Thomas out. Like, this is an offense and defense that were struggling, who are now losing multiple high draft picks and like 45% of their cap. So, what are they supposed to be doing on offense? They weren't exactly. So, just to put this into perspective, they've been so underwhelming this year. They are one of 3 teams that has not covered a game this season. Denver, Carolina, the New York Giants are the 3. Of those teams, the Giants are the only team that doesn't even have a push. So they're not even keeping games close. So when we look at them heading up against a team like Buffalo, who has the second highest against the spread margin in the league, second to only San Francisco, at a plus 11.2, they're not just winning spreads. Now, granted, they just dropped their last one, and even with dropping the last one as a favorite, they're still this high. They absolutely crush these spreads. So, without a doubt, I'm leaning towards Buffalo as high as they could get up to like 18. And I'd probably then start questioning, but at 14 and a half, completely comfortable with it. You're going to want to get on it sooner rather than later. The other way that I'm leaning, which obviously makes sense with all these injuries and how underwhelming the Giants have been, is that their game total for this one is 13 and a half. On what planet is this offense supposed to hit 14 against Buffalo? I just don't see that happening. I see that being another nice little Easter egg there for you. V, what are you seeing with this matchup? I mean, it's just a tough break. It would have been already a tough matchup for the Giants if they were healthy. And now they just are missing literally everybody under the sun. So what are you seeing with this one?
Yeah, it's probably not a great sign that the point total only moved like half a point with the news of Daniel Jones being out and Tyrod Taylor playing this game. It's not a good look anywhere at all for the Giants. Even though Buffalo is traveling back from London, this is a night game, which I would imagine gives them extra time to rest up and prepare and not have like a huge jet lag difference in this game. I think that will help them out a lot. And then, like you said, the Giants are just injured everywhere. No Daniel Jones, no Andrew Thomas, no John Michael Schmidt. Saquon Barkley is questionable. Darren Waller is not questionable. He finally had his big breakout game last week, but he might not be ready to go in this one. The Giants secondary is atrocious. They can't stop anybody. And now you have Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Have fun with that. I mean, there's no way you're going to be able to slow that down. So yeah, this is not going to be a good game. I'm not planning on even watching much of it because it's not going to go well. So I mean, yeah, you got to take Buffalo. I don't see how the Giants can do it. I mean, they got a red zone pick six against Tua last week, and they still couldn't cover the spread because they couldn't score a touchdown on offense. This is a bad, bad, bad football team. There's just nothing else you can say about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's needless to say. When you look at this, it's been a long time. The last time they covered a game was last January.
Long time.
Not a good look. So, I'm right there with you. You know, I know that it's tough to flex games out, but
You can do it. Let's get the Lions and Bucks in prime time. Can we please? I
yeah,
mean, that'd be so
thank
much
you.
more fun.
That would have been a way better matchup. Completely agree.
Yes.
So, that does it for us for our breakdown for week 6. Back same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern. So definitely don't miss it. Head over to importantnonsense.com to see all the work the IN team has. That's also where you can sign up to be a member. That's how you get into our Discord. You can see all the betting, fantasy, DFS, guillotine content. Ask the team anything you need. Both of us in the sports betting tab, all the fantasy guys in the fantasy tab. Definitely check it out. You can get some more money lines, some teasers, player props, all that stuff. We add more little tidbits into our weekly betting thread, so go check that out. We're also happy to break down any game that you did not see broke down right here. We'll give you our analysis of it, what bets we might be liking from it, and where we see the value lying. Also, if you want to get in on some important nonsense merch, check out the store, promo code LOCK. We would really appreciate it. That helps us out a ton. And yeah, it was fun, V. That does it for another week. You got any parting words for the folks at home?
Thanks for joining in. Thanks for watching. I think, yeah, a lot of great picks on our cards this week. Hopefully, you guys enjoy the games and make some money. Good luck to everyone.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. And, until next time, everybody, good night and good luck.